The morning that changed everything began like any other quiet, steady, uneventful, the kind of morning where nothing hints at danger or chaos. Sunlight spilled across the living room floor in long golden stripes, warming the wooden surface, and brushing lightly against the fur scattered near the dog crate. My pit bull, Shadow, was curled inside the crate with her head resting between her paws, one eye always slightly open as if guarding the house even in her sleep. She was only 10 months old, big for her age, powerful but clumsy, energetic but unpredictable. She had destroyed 2 couches, a chair, 3 slippers, and a curtain in her short time living with us, but somehow none of that mattered to me anymore. I had wanted a dog my entire life. This chaotic creature was the fulfillment of a childhood dream I had waited over a decade to experience. My kids were in the living room playing with blocks, their laughter echoing through the quiet house. My son stacking tiny wooden towers while my daughter knocked them down with delighted squeals. They trusted Shadow completely, even though the dog was still learning how to behave around small children. To them, she wasn't a destructive tornado of energy. She was a warm, protective shadow that followed them everywhere. The only reason she was inside the crate that morning was because I didn't want to risk another piece of furniture being sacrificed while I checked the mailbox outside. Just 2 minutes, I told myself as I slipped into my sandals. What could possibly happen in 2 minutes? The air outside was cool, dust flakes drifting lazily across the driveway as I walked down toward the mailbox. Everything felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. The kind of peace you only realize is suspicious once it's gone. It wasn't until I was halfway back to the house that something felt wrong. The wind wasn't blowing hard, but my front door was. Wide open, swaying slightly like someone had left in a hurry. My heart flipped violently inside my chest. At first, I tried to convince myself I had forgotten to close it properly, but deep down I already knew something was wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. Shadow burst through that open doorway like a creature unleashed from darkness. She didn't trot or jog, she sprinted full force, ears pinned back, eyes locked on something behind me, and her chest heaving with adrenaline. She wasn't running toward me. She was running past me. That was the moment fear stabbed through me so sharply I almost collapsed. Dogs don't run blindly like that unless they're chasing something or someone. I didn't stop to look around. My mother's instinct overrode everything else. I rushed straight back inside, my breath coming in short, painful bursts. I called my kids' names, my voice breaking. Nothing, no answer. Silence, a silence so heavy it felt like the walls were pressing inward. My feet pounded against the hardwood floor as I tore through the hallway, checking every room, every corner. Then I found them. Their bedroom door was shut, locked from the outside. I felt something inside me snap. My hands shook violently as I tried to twist the knob, as if the force of my panic alone could break it open. The realization hit me like a punch. Someone had tried to get into my house, had found my children, had panicked, and had locked them in to keep them quiet. I didn't even want to imagine what could have happened if the intruder had been braver, more reckless, or more desperate. My kids were crying on the other side of the door, small, terrified voices whispering, "Mom? Mom, are you there?" I pressed my forehead to the door, swallowing back my tears. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Stay quiet. Don't move, I'm going to get you out." I sprinted across the house, grabbed the screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, and hurried back, my breaths ragged. Every second felt like a minute. Every minute felt like an hour. My brain was screaming that the intruder could still be inside, hiding somewhere, watching me, waiting. I tried to push the thought aside, but the dread crawled up my spine anyway. As soon as I freed the lock, the door flew open and my kids practically launched into my arms. Their small bodies trembled against me. I held them close, whispering again and again, "You're safe, you're safe. I'm here." But even as I said the words, a part of me knew we weren't safe yet. Not until someone checked the house. Not until I knew he was gone. Not until I knew the danger was over. My hands shaking, I grabbed my phone and called the police. My voice cracked as I told them someone had broken in, that my kids had been locked in their room, that I didn't know if the intruder was still somewhere inside. They told me to stay outside, take the kids, and wait for the officers. So I did. I gathered my children outside on the porch, my arms wrapped tightly around them. My heart was still pounding, and every sound, even the wind rustling the leaves, felt like a threat. Shadow wasn't anywhere in sight, not at first. But then, from the far edge of my yard, I saw her. She was pacing near the bush, her body tense, her fur raised, her growl deep and rumbling. Shadow wasn't afraid. She was hunting someone. And the thought that she had gone after the intruder alone made my chest tighten with a mix of fear and pride. The police arrived what felt like years later. Their flashing lights painted the street in blue and red. They swept the house carefully, checking every corner, every closet, every room. Finally, one of the officers came outside and confirmed what I already suspected. Yes, ma'am, it was a break-in. That confirmation didn't bring relief. It only made everything feel more real, more terrifying. The officer continued. Whoever did this probably didn't know the kids were home. When they realized it, they must have panicked and locked them in the room they were in. The thought made me sick. They grabbed almost everything they could, the officer added. Whoever it was intended to clean you out. Thousands worth of stuff. But then he pointed at the broken window, and then something scared him off. I knew exactly what that something was. Shadow. My destructive, stubborn, hyperactive pit bull puppy who had broken furniture, eaten toys, chewed. Shoes had also saved my children's lives. She had broken out of her crate, chased a grown man out of my home, and kept him from taking anything else. Maybe even kept him from hurting my kids. That realization hit harder than anything else. That was the moment. I knew Shadow wasn't just a pet. She was family. She was a protector. She was the one who had saved us when I wasn't even in the house. The rest of that day felt like a blur, shifting shapes, half-heard sentences, and the sharp, metallic smell of fear still clinging to my clothes. Even though the officers had left, the house no longer felt like mine. The shadows seemed darker, the corners deeper, and every creak of the wooden floor felt like a warning. My children refused to leave my side, clinging to my shirt with silent, trembling hands. I didn't blame them. The home that once sheltered them had turned into a battlefield without warning. I watched Shadow lying on the living room floor, her chest rising and falling in heavy, exhausted breaths. Her paws were scraped, her fur matted in places, and there was dried blood, not hers, caught between her teeth. She had fought, she had chased, she had bitten, she had protected. Even though she was only a 10-month-old puppy, something primal inside her had awakened that morning, a fierce loyalty that no amount of training could ever create. She wasn't tired because of running, she was tired because she had fought. For us, I knelt beside her and gently placed my hand on her head. She lifted her eyes toward me, soft but alert, as if still listening for danger. "Good girl," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You saved us." That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the open door, the broken window, the moment I found the kids locked in their room. My heartbeat echoed in my ears like a drum, reminding me that danger had stepped into my home, into the space where my children played, laughed, lived. And even though the intruder was gone, the fear stayed behind. The next morning, the police returned with an update. The officer standing at my door held a small notebook and had a strange expression somewhere between disbelief and restrained. Laughter. "Ma'am," he said, clearing his throat, "we have news about your intruder." My pulse quickened. "Did you find him?" "Yes," the officer replied. "He checked into the emergency room last night." My eyebrows shot up. "Emergency room?" The officer nodded. "Completely covered in dog bite wounds. Arms, legs, shoulder, pretty much everywhere. Your dog didn't just chase him out the window. She nearly tore him apart." I looked at Shadow, who sat proudly by my feet now, tail thumping against the floor. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A deep, shaky laugh that carried relief and disbelief and pride all mixed into one, he claimed. The officer continued, flipping through his notes, that he was attacked by a demon dog while trying to escape some imaginary danger. I raised an eyebrow. "Imaginary danger?" The officer smirked. His story kept changing. First he said he was just walking by your house. Then he said he heard screaming and tried to help. Then he said a wild dog trapped him. So, he didn't tell you he was breaking into my house? Oh, he did in round 3, the officer said. He finally confessed when the doctor told him the bite marks clearly came from a household dog. He panicked and admitted the whole thing. For a moment, I imagined it, the burglar climbing through the window, thinking he was about to steal expensive electronics, then freezing when he saw Shadow breaking out of her crate like a mythological beast awakened from centuries of sleep. She must have lunged at him before he could even get his foot properly inside. No wonder he dove back out the window headfirst. Will he go to jail? I asked. Yes, and he'll also be paying for the damages. And the medical bills are his responsibility too. You're not liable for anything. I felt another wave of relief, but underneath it was something else. Anger, not the loud, fiery kind, but the cold, quiet anger that settles deep inside your bones. Someone had locked my children in their room. Someone had stepped into my home without permission. Someone had made me feel helpless, and I hated that feeling more than anything. After the officer left, I walked through the house slowly, tracing the intruder's steps, the overturned lamp, the scattered jewelry box, the footprints on the carpet, the muddy smear on the hallway wall where he must have tripped. Every small detail made my skin crawl. He had touched everything. He had moved freely through every room, including my children's room. Shadow followed me closely, pressing against my leg every few seconds as if reminding me, I'm here. You're safe now. What was I? Safety suddenly felt like an illusion, something fragile, something that could shatter any moment. For the first time since moving into this house, I questioned whether I had chosen the right neighborhood, whether I had chosen the right life, whether I had done enough to protect my kids. That evening, after the children were asleep, I sat on the couch with Shadow's head resting on my lap. I stroked her fur gently as my mind replayed everything from yesterday. The break-in, the panic, the fear, the relief. And then the realization struck me with full force. If Shadow hadn't been here, the intruder wouldn't have run away. If Shadow hadn't escaped the crate, he might have hurt my kids. If Shadow hadn't fought back, the story could have ended. In a nightmare, I swallowed hard. She had saved their lives, Dot, and mine, and that was only the beginning of what this dog was about to mean to us. Our scientific adventure continued as we entered a bright, crystal-clean laboratory where a giant transparent water tank stood in the center like the heart of a science world, its surface shimmering under white lights, making everything feel magical and exciting for young learners who were ready to explore floating and sinking in a deeper and more meaningful way. A long silver table beside the tank displayed a variety of objects, some smooth, some rough, some hollow, some heavy, some soft, each one waiting to reveal its secret behavior in water. The tray included a wooden cube, a metal key, a rubber duck, a glass marble, a stone, a plastic spoon, a sponge, a leaf, a ping-pong ball, a coin, a toy boat, an empty aluminum can, a balloon, a feather, a clay ball, a bottle cap, a bar of soap, a cotton ball, and many other items designed to help children develop sharp scientific observation skills. Before starting, the instructor reminded everyone that floating and sinking are not decided only by weight, but also by density, shape, air inside the object, material, and the amount of water the object pushes away, which is called displacement. The first object tested was a sponge. When gently placed on the water, it floated at first because of the tiny air pockets trapped inside. But as it slowly absorbed more and more water, those pockets disappeared and the sponge became heavier, eventually sinking to the bottom, teaching students that some objects can change their floating behavior depending on how water interacts with them. The next object was an empty aluminum can, which floated beautifully because it was full of air, but the moment a small amount of water was poured inside, it became unstable and tilted, and when half filled, it lost its buoyancy completely and sank, proving that trapped air plays a huge role in flotation. Then came the metal key, which sank instantly without hesitation because metal is dense and allows no air pockets inside, making it a perfect example of high-density material sinking. In water, A feather was placed next, floating softly on the water surface like a gentle cloud because it was extremely light, and the surface tension of water supported it gently, preventing it from sinking. The ping-pong ball floated easily too, not only because it was hollow and light, but because its round shape helped it push water aside, creating strong buoyancy. The clay ball sank quickly when dropped into the tank, but when the same clay was shaped into a tiny boat, it floated perfectly, demonstrating one of the most important scientific discoveries that shape can be more important than the material itself. The leaf floated quietly on the surface, supported again by light weight and surface tension. By the end of this part, the children understood that floating and sinking are complex and wonderfully interesting concepts influenced by multiple factors, and they learned through real observation that density, shape, material, and trapped air can completely change how an object behaves in water, turning this experiment into a fascinating scientific story full of discovery and excitement. As the experiment continued beyond the initial observations, the room filled with even more excitement because the children were now beginning to predict the results before each object touched the water, showing that their young minds were slowly transforming into real scientists, capable not only of watching but also reasoning with confidence and curiosity. The instructor then introduced a new set of objects, this time focusing on items that look similar but behave very differently in water, to help the children understand how appearances can be deceiving. A plastic apple and a real apple were placed on the table, and the students were encouraged to guess which one would float. Most believed both would behave the same since they looked almost identical, but as soon as they were gently lowered into the tank, the real apple floated while the plastic one sank because the real apple had tiny air pockets inside its flesh, making it less dense than water, while the plastic one was solid and heavier. This moment triggered a wave of amazement in the group, and the children leaned closer toward the tank, eager for more surprises. The instructor then took out 2 candles, one made of wax and one made of resin, and explained that even though both looked like simple sticks, their floating behavior depended entirely on the density of the material they were made from. When placed in the water, the wax candle floated slowly with a gentle wobble, while the resin candle sank sharply like a dart, reinforcing once again that what matters most is not always what we see, but what lies inside the object at a structural level. Next came a sealed bottle of oil, which floated gracefully on top of the water, and then a sealed bottle of honey, which sank immediately because honey is far denser than water. The children found this especially fascinating because the bottles were the same size and shape, yet their behavior in the water was completely different. Wanting to push the experiment further, the instructor brought out a small balloon filled with air, a second balloon filled with water, and a third balloon filled with sand. The air-filled balloon floated, the water-filled balloon hovered in the middle of the tank in a strange balancing act that looked magical, and the sand-filled balloon sank as fast as a stone, teaching the class how the same outer shell can produce 3 completely different results based solely on what fills it. After this, the instructor dimmed the room lights slightly and added a beam of soft blue light under the tank, making the water glow like a giant underwater stage, helping the children focus even more deeply on the movement of each object as if they were watching a live documentary. The final demonstration involved temperature. 2 metal spoons were shown, one hot and one cold. The hot spoon created tiny bubbles around its surface the moment it touched the water, causing it to sink slightly slower, while the cold spoon sank instantly, proving that temperature affects density and buoyancy in subtle ways. By the time this extended session came to an end, the children were no longer just observing objects, they were questioning, comparing, predicting, and analyzing, which transformed the entire lesson into a powerful journey of scientific thinking. They didn't just learn what floats and what sinks. They learned why, and that understanding changed their simple experiment into a deep exploration of the hidden rules that govern the physical world around them, filling the room with wonder, excitement, and a sense of discovery that would stay with them far beyond the walls of the classroom. The classroom grew even more alive with excitement as the instructor introduced a new challenge that transformed the simple, floating and sinking activity into a full scientific adventure. He brought out a tall metal cart covered with a white cloth, and when he lifted it away, the children gasped at the sight of dozens of unusual objects arranged neatly in separate trays: smooth shells, bamboo tubes, volcanic rocks full of tiny holes, sealed bags of rice, plastic fruits, hollow wooden blocks, dense chunks of metal, glass jars, and even colorful balloons filled with different materials. The children gathered around eagerly, their eyes shining with curiosity, as the instructor explained that today wasn't about guessing anymore. Today was about thinking, experimenting, proving, and discovering the deeper reasons behind each object's behavior. He divided the students into small groups and gave each group a tray of mixed objects, so they could test them in the large water tank and figure out why some floated while others sank. One group picked up a volcanic rock and assumed it would sink because it looked heavy, but when they placed it gently into the water, it floated beautifully because tiny air pockets trapped inside made it lighter than it appeared. Another group discovered that a bamboo tube floated instantly due to the hollow space inside, and they excitedly shared their findings with the others. A sealed bag of rice sank slowly as the children realized that even though the bag was soft, the packed grains inside made it dense enough to pull it downward. A packet of instant noodles caused confusion when it floated at first, then slowly dipped sideways, half floating and half sinking, teaching the children how air trapped inside. The packaging competed with the weight inside. The air-filled balloon bounced happily on the water's surface. The water-filled balloon hovered in a strange balance that amazed the entire class, and the sand-filled balloon plunged straight to the bottom, showing clearly how the same outer shell could behave three completely different ways depending on what was inside. The room buzzed with discussion, ideas, arguments, and excitement as students began talking like real scientists, using words like density, air pockets, shape, and displacement without any hesitation. Seeing their growing confidence, the instructor announced a final challenge. Each group had to build their own floating structure using only clay, foil, toothpicks, and straws. The children jumped into the task with enthusiasm, shaping little boats, rafts, bowls, and strange creative designs that reflected their imagination. Some creations floated perfectly, others tipped and spun in funny circles, while a few sank straight to the bottom, making the children laugh before quickly redesigning their models to try again. The room filled with joy, competition, and experimentation, as every child kept testing, adjusting, and rebuilding their creations. When the activity finally slowed down, the instructor turned off the main lights and projected a beautiful underwater video showing giant ships gliding across oceans, submarines diving deep into the dark blue sea, and marine animals using natural buoyancy to float and swim gracefully. The children sat mesmerized, realizing that everything they had just learned, the behavior of objects, the importance of shape, the role of trapped air, the magic of displacement, was the same science used by real engineers and nature itself. A quiet sense of wonder spread across the room as they watched the glowing screen, feeling as if a hidden world had opened in front of them. A world filled with mystery, beauty, and endless possibilities waiting to be explored. As the underwater video faded softly from the screen and the lights slowly brightened again, the classroom's atmosphere shifted into a calm but deeply thoughtful silence, the kind that only comes when young minds have witnessed something bigger than themselves, something that makes the world suddenly feel wider and more meaningful. The instructor noticed this moment of quiet reflection and decided to take the experience one step further, walking toward the giant water tank with a gentle smile as he asked the children to gather close again. He reached into a small wooden box on the counter and pulled out a set of transparent spheres, some filled with air, some filled with salt water, some filled with oil, and one left completely empty, explaining that even liquids inside objects can change their behavior in surprising ways. When he placed the air-filled sphere into the tank, it floated instantly, wobbling playfully as it rolled across the surface like a tiny planet. The saltwater sphere sank halfway, but not all the way, settling in the middle of the tank in a mesmerizing, suspended position that made the children gasp as if they were seeing magic. The oil-filled sphere floated but at a strange angle, tilting as though it couldn't decide whether it wanted to rise or fall, showing the children that different liquids have their own densities, each one interacting with water in a unique way. The empty sphere behaved unpredictably, dipping below the surface, then rising again, creating small swirling ripples as if the water itself were whispering around it. The instructor explained how scientists around the world use these same principles to design diving equipment, weather instruments, and even spacecraft training devices, making the children suddenly aware that they were learning the very foundations of real-world physics. With renewed excitement, the students began asking questions faster than the instructor could answer them, questions about submarines, hot air balloons, whales, icebergs, and even the bodies of humans and how they float or sink in different water conditions. To satisfy their curiosity, the instructor prepared a quick demonstration using warm water and cold water dyed in different colors. When he poured the warm red water into the cold blue tank, the warm layer hovered on top before slowly mixing, showing the children how temperature affects density. He then introduced a small mechanical fish-in educational toy with adjustable air chambers inside and set it into the tank. The fish sank at first, then rose, then hovered in place, and the children were stunned to learn that submarines operate using the exact same technique, filling or releasing air to control their depth. The room was alive again, buzzing with amazement, as the instructor allowed the students to experiment with the mechanical fish, adjusting the tiny valves and watching how even the smallest changes affected its movement. Their hands were steady, their eyes focused, and their minds sharp, transforming the water tank into a lively workshop where every ripple carried a new discovery. By now, the children were not only observing, they were predicting, testing, debating, and explaining their findings with confidence that had grown stronger with each passing moment. The instructor watched them with pride, grateful to witness their transformation from passive learners into active explorers driven by curiosity. As the activity came to an end, he gently tapped the side of the tank, letting the water settle into a still, glass-like surface, and told the children that today they had not just learned about floating and sinking, they had learned how to think like scientists, how to look deeper, how to question the world instead of accepting it at face value. The class gathered their things slowly, still discussing what they had seen, their voices full of energy and wonder as they headed toward the door, but even as they left the room, their eyes kept drifting back toward the glowing blue tank as if the mysteries inside it were calling them to return, promising that there was still so much more hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered. When I returned from checking the mail and saw my dog bolting out the front door, my heart nearly stopped. My mind raced, thinking of my children locked in their room, the open door, and the chaos that had just erupted in my home. But before panic could fully take over, my dog, the pit bull I had only recently adopted, launched herself like a fury of fur and teeth, charging toward the intruder who had dared to step foot in my house. The man, clearly not expecting such resistance, stumbled backward through the broken window he had come through, crashing onto the front yard with a scream that would haunt him forever. I stood frozen for a moment, my adrenaline mixed with awe, at how fearlessly my dog protected my family. I ran toward the room where my kids were locked, fearing they might have been harmed in the struggle, but they were crying, startled but unharmed, thanks to the small cage that my dog had managed to break free from. The intruder scrambled to get up, bloodied and terrified, his attempts to flee utterly futile as the pit bull cornered him relentlessly. I called 911 again, barely able to explain through my shaking voice that the thief was still on the property, now a tangled mess of panic and injuries caused by my dog's perfectly timed intervention. When the police arrived, they found the man limping and clutching his arm, his face red with bites and scratches. The sheer ridiculousness of the situation, the audacity of a burglar thinking he could ransack a house with a protective dog inside, and the dog's terrifying precision made me both terrified and exhilarated. The officers secured him, and as I watched him being handcuffed, I realized just how narrowly we had avoided a real disaster. My dog, still growling and circling the intruder, finally calmed when she saw my children were safe. It was an overwhelming mix of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. That night, after calling the police and ensuring my kids were asleep, I sat in the living room staring at the shredded couch and torn chair, the remnants of what had been an ordinary morning. The chaos and destruction had cost me money, certainly, but it had saved my family from a potentially dangerous intruder, and I couldn't stop staring at my pit bull, who had instantly become not just a pet but the ultimate guardian. The thought that this same intruder had shown up at the emergency room hours later, covered in bite marks, made me laugh nervously, horrified by how lucky we had been. It wasn't just about furniture or money anymore. It was about understanding. The raw, unpredictable power of a loyal dog who would put herself in danger to protect her humans. I sat there for hours that night, still shaking, reflecting on how a single reckless criminal had underestimated a tiny but ferociously brave creature, and how quickly life could shift from mundane frustration to terrifying adrenaline in the span of a few minutes. That day changed my understanding of responsibility, fear, and the strange way courage manifests not in humans alone, but in the most unexpected companions we invite into our lives, even after the police took the intruder away. The adrenaline in my body didn't subside. I kept replaying every moment, how he had panicked when my dog lunged, how he had scrambled through the broken window, and how my pit bull had acted instinctively, without hesitation, to protect my children. I couldn't help but marvel at her intelligence and loyalty, but at the same time, my mind wandered to the fragility of our situation, how one wrong move could have turned this entire morning into a tragedy. The house was a mess, shredded couch cushions, claw marks on the furniture, broken glass from the window, and scattered belongings that told the story of a criminal who hadn't realized just how dangerous his decision was. My kids, although safe, were shaken. Their cries had subsided, but the fear lingered in their wide eyes, and I realized that the incident had left a mark on them too. I tried to explain gently, without frightening them, that our dog had protected them, and that everything was going to be okay, but even I knew that the sense of safety had been shaken forever. After making sure my children were calm and fed, I went around the house, picking up what I could and assessing the damage. I called my insurance company, mentally preparing for the long battle of claims and repairs, but even in that chaos I felt a sense of relief and gratitude that outweighed the cost of broken furniture. The realization that a random criminal could invade our lives so suddenly made me reconsider every precaution I had taken and everyone I had neglected. I promised myself that nothing like this would ever happen again. I secured locks, reinforced windows, and even started researching training exercises to make my dog even more vigilant, knowing that her instincts had been the only thing keeping my family safe. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the floor surrounded by the wreckage of our living room, my dog curled up beside me, her eyes still alert. I reflected on how life could change in an instant, how fragile safety could be, and how much courage and loyalty could come from the most unexpected places. The thief's audacity, my children's vulnerability, and my dog's fearless intervention combined into a story I would never forget, a story that made me respect the unpredictability of life, the responsibility of parenthood, and the quiet, powerful bravery of a creature who had entered our lives and become our guardian in ways I never could have imagined. The days following the break-in felt surreal, like I was living in a strange version of my own life that I hadn't asked for. The police had caught the intruder, and his hospital records confirmed the chaos my dog had caused him bite marks all over his arms, legs, and torso, and yet knowing he would survive didn't erase the fear I felt that morning. I found myself replaying every decision, leaving the kids alone for a few minutes, trusting the crate, assuming a thief wouldn't come into the house, every assumption shattered in an instant. My neighbors came by, expressing shock and sympathy, and I realized that while the media often highlighted daring heists or clever criminals, few stories captured the mix of terror, courage, and luck that had played out in my living room. Even Though nothing physically harmed my children, the emotional impact lingered. My toddler would occasionally look at the broken window and cry, asking questions I wasn't sure how to answer. I explained that our dog was a hero, that she had protected them, and tried to reassure them the world wasn't always scary, but deep down, I knew the memory of that fear had imprinted itself in their minds. At the same time, I had to deal with the material aftermath: shattered furniture, scratched floors, broken glass, and a sense of violation that no amount of cleaning could erase. I called insurance, filed reports, and scheduled repairs, but each step reminded me that security and vigilance weren't just concepts. They were responsibilities I could never take lightly again. I started installing new locks, motion sensors, and even began a daily training routine with my pit bull, who seemed almost aware of the importance of her role. Every bark, every alert, every small growl was a reminder of how close we had come to disaster and how her instincts had turned chaos into survival. Yet, beyond repairs and security measures, the experience changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I became hyper-aware of safety, hyper-conscious of risks, and yet more grateful for the unpredictable courage that comes from love and loyalty. I realized that life could pivot in a single moment from mundane routine to life-or-death chaos, and that courage often comes from those we least expect. My dog had saved us, yes, but she had also reminded me of something deeper: vigilance, responsibility, and appreciation for the fragile, fleeting moments of security that we often take for granted. That week, as I sat with my children and watched them play safely, I felt a profound sense of humility and awe. The criminal had been reckless, unprepared, and ultimately powerless against the instincts and determination of a guardian who loved without question. And I knew that the lesson of that morning, the lesson of trust, vigilance, and the unexpected heroism of a loyal companion, would stay with me for the rest of my life, shaping how I protected, valued, and understood the fragility and strength of the family I had fought so hard to safeguard. Even after the police had dealt with the intruder, the aftermath of that morning lingered like a shadow over our home. I found myself constantly double-checking locks, watching my kids' every movement and listening for every sound that seemed out of place. My dog, once just a playful addition to the family, had become an almost mythical figure in our household: alert, vigilant, and fiercely protective. Each bark or low growl reminded me of what had happened, of how quickly life could flip from ordinary to terrifying, and how courage sometimes comes in unexpected forms. Dealing with the financial and physical damage was another challenge. The furniture repair alone cost hundreds of dollars, and insurance required detailed reports and evidence. I spent hours documenting the destruction, filing claims, and coordinating repairs, all while juggling the emotional needs of my children, who had experienced their first real fear of danger. There were moments when I wanted to cry out of frustration, exhaustion, and relief all at once. But through it all, a strange sense of empowerment took hold. I realized that surviving such a direct threat, protecting my family, and witnessing the bravery of my dog had changed something fundamental in me. I was no longer just a parent or a homeowner. I had become a guardian in every sense of the word, responsible not just for my children's physical safety, but for their emotional well-being, teaching them early that courage and protection can take many forms. My pit bull, with her ripped ears and mud-stained paws, had taught me lessons about instinct, loyalty, and fearless action that no book or class could have conveyed. And as I watched her curl up beside my children that night, I understood that true safety often comes not from planning alone, but from the willingness to act decisively when danger strikes. The incident reshaped my entire perspective on responsibility, on the unpredictability of life, and on the importance of trusting instincts, both human and canine. Even weeks later, I could feel the tension in my body relax only slightly, knowing that while the threat had passed, the lessons would last a lifetime. The chaos, destruction, and terror of that morning had forged a new sense of vigilance in me, one that would ensure my family's safety for years to come, and a profound respect for the silent, unwavering bravery of a companion who had risked herself without hesitation to keep us safe. After the break-in, the legal process began, and it was more exhausting than I had anticipated. The intruder, now in police custody, faced charges of burglary, property destruction, and endangering minors. Court dates were scheduled, statements were taken, and I found myself reliving that terrifying morning over and over, recounting every detail to officers, lawyers, and eventually the court. Each retelling was emotionally draining, forcing me to relive the fear, adrenaline, and helplessness I had felt when the door was open and my children were locked inside. But with every hearing, I also felt a strange sense of validation. The system was acknowledging what had happened, recognizing the danger that had been present, and finally providing some form of justice. The intruder's defense was almost comical at times. He tried to claim he didn't know anyone was home, that he had been desperate, and that my dog had attacked him unprovoked. The thought that he underestimated my dog's instincts, or my ability to protect my family, made me both furious and slightly amused. Watching the legal proceedings unfold gave me a mix of relief and lingering anxiety, knowing that even with justice, the emotional scars could linger indefinitely. My children, thankfully, showed resilience beyond their age, but I noticed small changes, the way they clung to me a little longer, the caution in their voices when answering the door, the pause before opening anything unfamiliar. I realized that protecting them wasn't just about physical safety anymore. It was about rebuilding their sense of security and trust in the world. In parallel, I focused on reinforcing the home, adding new locks, alarms, and teaching my kids how to stay safe in age-appropriate ways. My dog, now treated like a hero, became even more integral to our household routine. I watched her patrol, alert, and calm my children when they became nervous, realizing that her role went far beyond companionship. She was a living, breathing shield of loyalty and courage. Weeks turned into months as the case slowly progressed, and while I navigated paperwork, court dates, and insurance claims, I also began to process the emotional toll. I journaled extensively, sometimes writing pages late into the night, unpacking every fear, every surge of adrenaline, every moment of helplessness I had experienced. Through this, I found myself gaining clarity, recognizing that while the physical danger had passed, the real work was learning to live without fear, rebuilding trust in safety, and appreciating the unpredictable bravery that had saved my family that day. It was a slow, deliberate process of healing, learning, and reclaiming the feeling of control in my life, all while knowing that the lessons of vigilance, courage, and loyalty would remain with me forever, even after the initial court hearings. The impact of the break-in continued to ripple through our lives. Every sound at the door, every unexpected knock, made my heart race, reminding me that safety is never guaranteed. The intruder had been caught, but the psychological weight of that morning lingered. I spent countless hours teaching my children about caution without instilling fear, explaining that while the world could be unpredictable, they were never alone and always protected. My dog, now trained more rigorously than ever, became an essential part of this protective environment, her presence a constant reassurance. In court, I testified about the events, describing how my dog had instinctively defended my children, how the intruder had broken the window, and how the chaos had unfolded. The judge listened intently, and the attorneys nodded, understanding that this wasn't just a case of property theft. It was a near-tragic event that could have ended very differently. The intruder tried to appear remorseful, but the evidence of his panic, his bite marks, and the statements from witnesses made it impossible to doubt the danger he had created. Beyond the legal realm, I found myself reflecting constantly on responsibility, vigilance, and the fragility of daily life. The financial costs of repairs and replacements were significant, but they paled in comparison to the lesson I had learned about preparedness and trust in instincts. I also realized how crucial it was to respect the power of animals as protectors, not just companions. Each day, as I watched my dog sleep beside my children or follow them through the house, I was reminded of the thin line between chaos and safety, and how courage and loyalty often come from the most unexpected places. Slowly the fear began to ease, replaced by gratitude for the safety of my children, for the courage of my dog, and for the chance to reclaim our home. Yet the experience left a permanent mark on me, shaping the way I interacted with the world, the precautions I took, and the understanding that true protection involves a combination of vigilance, preparation, and trust in those who are loyal and fearless. Over time, the legal proceedings concluded, but the lessons remained vivid, etched into my memory as a reminder that life can change in an instant and that courage, whether human or animal, can alter the course of danger in ways no one could anticipate. Even after the court ruled and the intruder was sentenced, the sense of unease lingered in our home. It wasn't fear in the traditional sense, but a heightened awareness of the fragility of everyday life. Every creak of the floorboards, every unexpected sound outside made me pause and evaluate the situation before reacting. I spent hours with my children, teaching them practical safety measures in age-appropriate ways, while also reassuring them that our home was safe and that they were protected. My dog remained hyper-vigilant, almost as if she understood the gravity of what had happened and felt a personal responsibility for guarding us. Her instincts had saved us once, and I realized that her loyalty and courage had created an invisible layer of protection that no lock or alarm could match. Beyond the practical measures, I began to focus on emotional recovery. I journaled extensively, unpacking the trauma of that morning, the fear I had felt, and the immense relief once my children were safe. Every session of writing helped me regain control over my mind and emotions, turning fear into reflection and gratitude. I also spent time analyzing how the intruder's ignorance and lack of preparation had contributed to his own downfall, understanding that danger often preys on the unprepared, but sometimes the universe provides its own unlikely guardians. The experience reshaped how I approached daily life. I became meticulous with security, attentive to potential risks, and deeply appreciative of small, ordinary moments of peace. Yet I also grew to trust an instinct my own and that of my loyal companion. Watching my dog patrol the house, alert yet calm, reminded me that bravery doesn't always come from human hands. In fact, it often comes quietly, unexpectedly, and without hesitation. Over weeks and months, I noticed subtle shifts in myself. I was calmer in emergencies, more decisive, and more conscious of the importance of vigilance. My children, too, began to show resilience, understanding that danger could exist, but that courage and preparation could overcome it. The house, once a place of routine and comfort, had transformed into a symbol of survival, awareness, and the bond between a family and its protector. And through it all, I realized that the events of that morning, chaotic, terrifying, and destructive, had fundamentally altered my understanding of safety, responsibility, and loyalty, leaving a permanent mark on my life that I would carry with me forever. Months had passed since that terrifying morning when our home had been invaded, yet the memory still lingered vividly, playing on a loop in my mind every time I closed my eyes. The intruder had been caught, the legal system had done its job. And in theory, the danger was over, but the emotional and psychological aftermath could not be erased so easily. Every sound outside, every unexpected knock, every creak in the floor reminded me that safety is never guaranteed and that vigilance is a lifelong responsibility. The experience had fundamentally shifted how I perceived the world, my home, and even my own instincts. I realized that life's ordinary moments could pivot into chaos in a matter of seconds, and that courage often emerges in the most unexpected ways. My pit bull, who had seemed like just a playful companion when I first brought her home, had proven to be an extraordinary guardian. Her instincts, her loyalty, and her unwavering bravery had not only saved my children's lives, but had also reshaped my understanding of protection and trust. Observing her move through the house with alertness, always ready to defend us, I recognized that heroism isn't limited to humans. It exists in quiet, instinctive actions that may never be fully understood but can alter the course of life in moments of crisis. In the months that followed, I focused heavily on restoring not just our physical home, but our emotional sense of safety. The broken window had been repaired, the shredded furniture replaced, and security measures, including reinforced locks, alarms, and surveillance, were implemented to give us tangible protection. However, the invisible scars left on our family required deeper work. I dedicated myself to teaching my children practical safety measures without instilling fear, encouraging awareness while reinforcing the knowledge that our home was a safe place. I spent long evenings talking to them about the events, framing the story not as a terrifying memory, but as a testament to courage, preparation, and the strength of our family. My pitbull became a central figure in this emotional recovery, her presence providing comfort, reassurance, and a living example of bravery that even my children could understand. The way she would patrol the house, alert but calm, had an almost magical effect on our sense of security, reminding us that protection often comes from the combination of instinct, loyalty, and courage. Alongside the practical adjustments, I devoted myself to reflection and personal growth. I journaled extensively, dissecting every fear, every moment of helplessness, and every decision I had made in those chaotic minutes. Writing became a therapeutic exercise, allowing me to confront lingering anxiety and transform it into insight and empowerment. I revisited the sequence of events over and over, analyzing how quickly life could spiral into danger, how fragile routines truly are, and how vital it is to trust both one's own instincts and the instincts of those we rely upon. The intruder's recklessness, combined with my dog's incredible intervention, had inadvertently taught me that vigilance, courage, and loyalty are sometimes more powerful than preparation or planning alone. The event became a framework through which I understood the delicate balance between fear and action, helplessness and control, chaos and protection. I realized that my role as a parent was more than providing food and shelter. It was cultivating a sense of security, teaching responsibility, and modeling resilience in the face of sudden, unpredictable danger. Over time, I noticed profound changes not just in myself, but in my children as well. They became more aware, yet confident, learning that life can be unpredictable, but that preparedness, courage, and trust can overcome fear. They learned that safety isn't merely the absence of danger, but the presence of vigilance, planning, and courageous action. My dog continued to teach them these lessons silently through her alertness, her protective instincts, and her ability to act decisively in moments of threat. Even the destroyed furniture, broken glass, and scattered belongings became symbols. Rather than reminders of trauma, they were proof that we had survived, that courage had prevailed, and that protection sometimes manifests in unexpected ways. I also shared our story selectively with friends, community groups, and parenting circles, emphasizing the importance of preparedness, awareness, and respect for the protective instincts of animals. Each retelling was both cathartic and educational, helping me process the experience fully while also providing guidance to others who might face danger in their own lives. Looking back, the lessons extended far beyond the immediate danger or the legal consequences faced by the intruder. The experience reshaped my worldview, my parenting approach, and my understanding of courage and loyalty. I realized that life could pivot in an instant, turning mundane routines into chaotic crises, and that resilience requires preparation, awareness, and decisive action. My pitbull's bravery was a daily reminder that protection and courage often come from sources we might not anticipate, creatures whose loyalty surpasses instinct, whose actions can alter the outcome of life or death. Situations in a matter of moments. Sitting in the restored living room, watching my children play safely, and seeing my dog lie peacefully nearby, I understood that the true victory wasn't in legal justice or in repairing broken furniture. It was in reclaiming our sense of safety, in rebuilding our confidence, and in recognizing the extraordinary power of loyalty, courage, and vigilance that had safeguarded us. The incident, terrifying as it was, had strengthened the bond within our family, deepened my respect for the unpredictable forces of bravery, and permanently altered the way I understood responsibility and protection. In that moment, I whispered quietly to myself, "We survived. We are safe. We are stronger than we knew." And in that affirmation, I found a peace and resolve that no threat, no chaos, and no fear could ever take away. The lessons of that morning courage in the face of danger, the power of instinct, and the unpredictable heroism of those we love would remain with us forever, shaping the way we lived, the way we protected each other, and the way we valued life itself.